This morning I'm speaking this morning, and the theme for this morning is sight. And in this verse it talks about how the words of my mouth, your mouth, and the meditation of my heart, your heart, be acceptable in God's sight. It's taken from Psalm 19 and verse 14, and it reads this: "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer." I just want you to think for a minute that actually something that we can do can actually please God. That as we gather this morning and either sit, stand, sing, read, listen, all of those things we can bring as an act of worship to God, and that he can be pleased with that. I think that's quite an amazing thought, that something that we can bring and offer will actually bring God pleasure this morning. So, as I've said already, today my message is entitled "The Gift of Sight." So, as most of you know, because we've talked about it quite a bit with one another, Dad at the moment basically can't see. He's had a couple of problems develop in his eyes. First of all, he had the lenses that were put in after his cataract operations have misted over, and so he had to go for what they call YAG laser treatment on that. And of course, we all thought that would be the end of it, but no, it has to be different with Dad, I suppose. So that obviously that would have worked if there hadn't been yet another problem going on. So we were referred on again to a different specialist that said that Dad has actually got, let me get this right, he's got a vein occlusion, very posh, vein occlusion in his right eye, and wet macular degeneration in his left eye. Fortunately, you could say the treatment for both conditions is the same, but the treatment isn't very pleasant. He's got to have injections into his eye, both eyes, one a month for 3 months, and then after that period they'll review to see whether that's actually achieving anything, because what happens is that both conditions block the light receptors at the back of the eye, so obviously reducing the ability to see. The light isn't getting through to the back of his eye. So we'd appreciate your prayers still for Dad, because he just find that so frustrating, because really these days that Dad is basically being limited to being able to read. He can't do a lot else, or watch the telly or see things out in the garden. So for him not to be able to see, I mean, I know it's a great deprivation to anybody, but for Dad in particular, at the moment, it really is. So it would be, please pray that the course of injections will bring about a good result. At least some improvement in his eyesight would be wonderful. Anyway, that's sort of the basis where I'm coming from. So working through these problems, obviously I've been thinking a lot about sight and vision and blindness and so on. And when I've been reading my Bible, I suppose because that's in sort of the back of my mind already, any verses that come across with sight or vision or whatever, just jump out of the page. And so I've kind of put those thoughts together. I collected them into a nice little pile and sorted them out into a message for today. Then, of course, 2 weeks ago, Mark also came and spoke about sight, and I thought, oh, right, okay. And he said some things, what I was going to say, but not all of them. So I thought, well, Mark often talks about God incidences, don't you, Mark? And so I decided that perhaps this was also a God incidence and not a coincidence that we were both thinking on the same theme. So as the message was largely prepared at that point, because I just have to do that with the way things are at home, I have to be ready well in advance in case things go pear-shaped. So I decided that God needed me to carry on with what I was going to say. So basically this morning there are two main things that I want to say, and Sam is going to go through the slides, hopefully without me prompting him today. And so the first one is that God sees everything. Now, some of the songs we've sung this morning have all been, well, all of the songs are connected with seeing. Sometimes God seeing, with us seeing, that connection. But God sees everything. Bible authors often use like parts of our body attributed to God. So like the eyes of God, the ears of God, the heart of God, God's strong and mighty arm, because that kind of helps us to visualize what God is like. And obviously when Jesus eventually came and his life is recorded for us in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, we get an even clearer picture of what God is like because we can see God through Jesus. So the first thing I wanted to say is that God sees everything, including me, and this is quite a challenging thought. A challenging thought. Some of us may not feel very comfortable with the idea that God sees everything that we do, both the good and the bad, and the not so good in between, perhaps. In Hebrews chapter 4, it says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. So it lays out in that verse that at some point in the future, we've got to give an account to God of the way we have been in life. And that nothing is hid from him. Nothing at all. A good example of this, if you go back to, right to the beginning, almost the beginning anyway, with the time of Noah, God saw everything that was going on at that time and he was not happy at all. It got to the point where he really regretted creating humanity. And he decided to sweep everything away, and we get the catastrophic events of the story of the flood. We're challenged that, the world that we live in now, you could argue, perhaps is even more wicked than it was in the time of Noah. God sees it all. God sees everything that we do. Another verse, Proverbs chapter 5, verse 21 says this, your ways, my ways, are in full view of the Lord, and he examines all of our paths. So it's not just, he's just not sort of having a casual gaze over the world. He's actually closely examining what goes on and takes an interest in that. In 2 Chronicles chapter 16, we're told this, the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth, looking to find those whose hearts are fully committed to him, so he could strengthen them. On this occasion, when God was looking, he was deeply disappointed because he couldn't find anybody that was fully committed to him. It was a king called King Asa, who, instead of relying on God to help him fight his battles and rule the country, he began to trust alliances with other people and pushed the Lord out and said, no, I can do this. I can do this without you. So, could this be true of me or you today, that God is actually looking down and he's standing ready to help us, and we're saying, actually, you know what? I can do it my way. I can do it myself. That kind of attitude. Well, the Bible tells us that when we're like that, God is very disappointed because he actually does want to help us and he does want to come alongside us and strengthen us in our different situations. So that's one idea. The other side, they flip the coin if you like. God sees me. Yes, that can be a challenging thing, but it can also be a comforting thought, God sees me, God sees you, is a comforting thought. All the way back in Genesis chapter 16, we find the story of a very desperate lady called Hagar. Sue spoke about Hagar at the start of the year. Remarkably, God stepped in to help this lady. She was facing certain death, and so was her son, Ishmael, in the hot and dry desert that they'd escaped to. In response, when God helped her, she gave this name to the Lord, or Yahweh, because it's Lord with capital letters, who spoke to her, and this is what she said: "You are the God who sees me. You are the God who sees me." Just her. Get everybody else that was on the earth that day. God saw Hagar and Ishmael in the desert and did something to help them. This was an amazing and unexpected happening for her. And it was a huge comfort, obviously, to her to know that God was watching over her and helping her. There are loads of verses in our Bibles about God seeing us and that being a comfort to us. Just one here, Psalm 33, verse 18 says, "But the eyes of the Lord are on those who fear him, on those whose hope is in his unfailing love." Is your hope in his unfailing love? Are you one of the ones who fear him? God is looking after you, looking down on you. That's a comfort. We often think about 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 12 on a Thursday night in the Zoom prayer meeting, because it says this: "For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are inclined to their prayers." So as we gather round our computers on a Thursday night, God is with us. He sees us sitting there in our homes, and he listens to our prayers as we pray together. And it's the same for you, in your situations at home. God sees you. He hears you as you pray. That is such an encouragement. One of the verses that I've read over this time that really encouraged me, and it was Louis Giglio who did the little thought that went with it, and it really touched my heart at the time. Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, it says this: "Jesus looked at them and said, 'With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible.'" Just notice that Matthew, when he writes down what he is saying, takes the time to record that Jesus looked at the people he was speaking to. One of the translations says Jesus looked intently at them and then went on to speak. So, eye-to-eye contact means that you want to speak to that person, and that person gives you eye contact back, and that's a good conversation. He was talking to the crowd about the things that seemed impossible. Rich people getting into heaven was what he was actually talking about. But in another way, Jesus was kind of saying to them, "Hey, I see you. I'm here. I'm looking at you. And I see that you think things are impossible. I see that you think that this is a struggle you're not going to get through. Be encouraged and comforted, because I can make it possible. I can make it possible. I can help you sort this out. I am the God who can sort out the impossible." That really touched my heart at the time, the thought that Jesus took the time to look at the person or the people that he was speaking to for that real fixed encounter, if you like. So that's the first part. So we know that God sees us can be a challenging thought. It can make us feel uncomfortable, especially if we're doing things we know we shouldn't be. All right, God sees us can be a comforting thought. Now for the next part, I'm going to ask you, how's your eyesight? How is your eyesight? just recently, I had to go and have my eyes tested, and I probably should have gone a bit sooner, but I didn't want to pay the bill. So yes, my eyesight had deteriorated, not a lot, but enough to warrant having a new prescription in my glasses. So we go to have our eyes checked. Do we actually check our spiritual eyes? Do we check ourselves? This is what I want to spend the rest of our time this morning together doing. So the Bible tells us that without God, we are in the dark and we can't see properly. Now, we may not agree with it, but that's what God says. He said, you can't understand and see properly yet if you don't know me. And without God, the Bible tells us that we're kind of short-sighted and blind even to God's truth. These sight issues with our spiritual sight, if you like, are a problem to us, but they aren't a problem to God. He can sort things out for us, like a good optician would sort you out. Joyce? Joyce had such problems getting hers sorted, haven't you, Joyce? Anyway, so the first thing I want us to think about then is, do you need God to shine his light and open the eyes of your understanding, perhaps for the first time? Do you find yourself in this position? In Isaiah chapter 42, verse 16, it says this, and God is speaking for himself, if you like, and he says, God says, I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them and make the rough places smooth. These are the things I will do. I will not forsake them. So this is a lovely promise from God, that if you feel as though you are still in the dark and don't understand about God, things about God, God says, well, I can fix that for you. I can lead you. I can help you. So it's really important that we understand, see the unique significance of Jesus. In the story of the Transfiguration, which I haven't got time to go through today, we find that Peter, James and John, they went up the mountain, didn't they, with Jesus, and Peter was so blown away by seeing Moses and Elijah and Jesus. He said, let's build a tent for each one of them to be in. It's so that we can have a nice gathering together. And at that point, God intervened and he said, this is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. Yes, Moses and Elijah, like in Old Testament times, were important men of God, said important things. But at this point, they were, if you like, history. And it was Jesus that had got to be the focus for the disciples. So at that point, after God had spoken and said, this is my son, listen to him, when the disciples looked again, we're told that they saw Jesus only. Moses and Elijah had disappeared from the picture, if you like, and only Jesus was left. So, let me ask you this question. Have you yet begun to see how significant Jesus is? He has the most significance above everything else in life. Listen to him, is what God says. If you don't understand that, ask that you would understand. So that's the first thing. Do you need God to shine a light on you so that you can see? Next one. Do you need to look to the cross for healing? Jesus, when he was on earth and coming up to the time of what we would call Easter, right, he spoke about the cross in connection with the story in Numbers chapter 21. In Numbers 21, the Israelites were being attacked and killed by deadly snakes. The remedy from God was for Moses to create a bronze snake and put it up high on a pole. And after that had been done, when anyone was bitten by the snake, all they had to do was to look at the bronze snake and they were healed of their poisonous bite and they lived. And Jesus makes a direct comparison with that story and his own story. He made it clear that in just the same way, if we look to him and understand what he did by dying on the cross, we too can live. We can be healed of the sickness of sin and receive eternal life. So, do you need to look at the cross, perhaps for the first time? Next one. Do you need to be careful about what you see and what you look at or are influenced by? Unfortunately, we know that in our current world, we hear lots and lots, don't we, about people who are viewing things online and getting involved in all sorts of things that are going to poison their mind. That you might say is an extreme, but are there things even in your life that you know you shouldn't really be looking at and shouldn't be allowing to influence you? In Matthew chapter 18, verse 9, Jesus gave this advice. It might seem a bit extreme, but this is what he said. If your eye causes you to stumble and sin, pull it out. Throw it away. In other words, what Jesus is really saying is, if your eyes, what you look at, are causing a problem for you and leading you down a path you shouldn't be going down, remove yourself from that source of temptation, because it's not going to get you anywhere that's good. So the idea of pulling your eye out obviously seems very extreme to us, but he's just making a point that if we're seeing and allowing ourselves to be influenced by stuff that's not good, then let's get rid of it. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7, it says this: don't be wise in your own eyes. Don't think, oh, it's not a problem, I can sort this. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord is his advice. Fear the Lord and shun evil. In other words, turn around. Go the other way. Don't allow it anywhere near you. Move yourself away from that influence. Next one. Do you need to guard against being critical of your brother or sister? Now, as I said earlier, when Dad had the first problem in his eyes, we thought it was just a simple thing, that it was the lens that's put in when you have cataracts had just clouded over. And simple procedure, really. A laser blows it all away and makes the lens clear again. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 5, Jesus said, when people were being critical, pointing a finger, saying, you're doing this, shouldn't be doing this, he said this: you hypocrite. First take the plank, that great big object, out of your eye, and then, and only then, will you see clearly enough to remove that tiny weeny little speck that you think you can see in somebody else. Be careful about, I'm sure we're all guilty of this, aren't we? We're so prone to pointing the finger at other people. We forget that we have faults of our own that are probably worse. And, Jesus says we shouldn't be like that. So this is perhaps a message to all of us, that we need to guard against how we approach dealing with people who perhaps we think we need to have a word with, make sure you're all right first before you go diving in, sorting out somebody else. Then the next one, this is, have you or have we, so you as a person or us as a church, lost our vision for the future? And what vision has God given us as a church? This is sort of a slight tangent to what we've already been talking about, but I still think it's very important. Sight, vision. And we've talked quite a bit recently about, and we need to be talking about it, and we need to be praying about our vision as a church going forward. In Proverbs 29 verse 18, we get this piece of advice. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keeps the law, happy is he. Oh, the Bible is telling us that we need to have something to focus on, to work towards, if you like, that's an important thing. And that if we haven't got it, in a sense, you could say your life falls apart because you haven't got that focus for what you're doing. And that's important for us as individual people. We need to know what our life has a purpose for. But it's, at the moment, for us as a church, it's super, super important that we understand where God wants us to go and that we come to a consensus together of that direction as well. Now, I'm sure that most of us at the moment would agree that the Lord has given us the work at the Manor House, that is a vital part, perhaps not all of our vision, but it's certainly a vital part of our vision at the moment and the development of that work down the road. And I came across this verse, Psalm 118, verse 23 says this, the Lord has done this, hasn't he? We know that. It's absolutely abundantly clear that God has his hand in this work. The Lord has done this. And then the verse goes on and it says, and it's marvellous in our eyes. Another connection with eyes. What he's done down the road, with the people down the road, the provision of food, the provision of volunteers, it is marvellous in our eyes. And we should rejoice and be glad that what God has done for us down there. This is kind of the next verse I'm going to read to you is in from 1 John chapter 3, verse 17. Kind of reminds us why that work is important. It says this, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? I'll just read that again. If anyone has material possessions, have you got material possessions? Yes, we have, haven't we? And do we see brothers and sisters who are in need? Yes, we do. Increasingly so with the way financial things are at the moment. Have we got any pity for them? Well, I do hope so. I do hope so, because if we haven't, it's very clear here in this verse. It says, if we haven't got the pity, how can the love of God be in us? If we haven't got time, if we haven't got the willingness to share, then it's no good us saying that we love God, because we're not showing it. It's quite serious thought, that, isn't it? And I think that idea of sharing and caring for the brothers and sisters outside is so important and must be central, not just to the vision for Manor House, but for the whole work of the church, whatever it is, Bethel Bears and so on, all the other things that we do, that compassion that we should have for those that are around us to try and show them the love of God. So while we're on the subject of the Manor House and that as being part of our vision as a church, can I just encourage you to keep on praying regarding that. You know that we're looking to have someone come and work alongside us, possibly within the umbrella of the Birmingham City Mission, but that isn't a given yet. So we're still praying into that. Tony was saying on Thursday night about knocking. We're knocking on a door. We're knocking on this door at the moment, the City Mission door. Does God want to open that door? Will you keep praying, please? That if that door isn't the door that's got to be opened to find the person that can come and help us, then God needs to shut that door. And please, God, will you open a different door? But we need to pray about that. We can't just sort of expect that it'll just land in our laps. God asks us to pray into these sorts of situations. So that's what I wanted to say on that point. So coming to kind of summarise what I've said today. So our final thoughts. Now, as I read this, I just want you to, if you want, you can close your eyes. Don't necessarily need to be looking at what comes up on the screen. Ask God, which of these is going to resonate most in your heart today? First of all, then, so let's remember that God always sees us. God always sees us. This thought should be a challenge. Well, it is a challenge to us to guard against offending him by our thoughts, by our words, by our actions. He always sees us, whatever situation we're in. Let's also be comforted in the knowledge that God sees us in all our joys. He loves it when we're, having a good time, that we're doing things that give us joy, gives him joy. But he also sees us in our times of sorrow. Eileen's had a difficult week this week. He's seen the family in the sorrow that they've had to endure this week with little Billy. And that he can help us in those difficult times, with those seemingly impossible situations, that he is always ready to help us in time of need. And then another one, let's remember to guard our eyes from seeing anything that would exert a harmful influence on our life. I just feel that's a really important thing to say. And then, lastly, is there anyone here today who needs to have their eyes opened? Jonah's got his hand up. And Jade, right? They need to have their eyes opened in the sense of starting to understand what this Jesus thing is all about. You don't get it yet. Remember this. I'm coming back round now to what Mark shared. Remember that Jesus asked blind Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus' reply was, "I want to see. I want to see." What do you want God to do for you? You want to see. Mark stood here 2 weeks ago and asked this question. I'm myself having to ask you again today. And as I said at the start, I really don't believe that this is a coincidence. Right? Perhaps when Mark was speaking a fortnight ago, he thought, that's me. But you walked out that door, and as soon as you walked out the door, the thought had gone. So I'm giving you another opportunity today, and I'm going to say to you, what is it that you want God to do for you? It may not be to get to know him for the first time. Maybe other things that are on your mind at the moment that you want God to do for you. We've got, I don't know how many people here this morning. We might all have a different thing that we would like God to do for us. He's giving you another opportunity to reply, Lord, I want to, put your own word in. Lord, I want to see. I want to get what this Jesus thing is all about. I don't understand, but I do want to understand. Or, God, I need help with this problem in my job, this problem in my family, this whatever. Put your own word in. Lord, I want to. What I would say to you today is please don't go out that door if you feel that God is saying something to you about this today. Speak to someone about it. Come and speak to me if you want, or Mark, or Tony, anyone that you feel that you can trust to talk to. Take the time and respond to this second request. That gracious God has given you another opportunity to respond. God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, full of loyal love and faithfulness. He sees you. He wants to help you. Thank you for listening.